Yes, I
Otherwise,
think so.
good. Otherwise, we'll just share the recording and we will just be a small but mighty group today.
Perfect.
All right. Harmeet, do you want to talk? The literature review is done. Thank you so much. And I know that there were a lot of questions surrounding it. And I know a couple of the people that had the questions said that unfortunately they just could not get onto this call today. So if you want to just fill us all in on the search terms, what you found, what it showed, and then they can hear it all too. And whatever questions are here can be answered. That would be fantastic.
Sure. So I will share the power presentation. It's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you see that? You can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will really shortly touch upon the method for the literature review, and then I will elaborate a bit more about the findings. And I would love to hear any thought, any comment, any idea, things you want us to explore more in more details, provide more aspect that you're finding missing. So there are many things here, so just feel free to stop me in any point and ask me question. So basically what we did is a scoping review because there are many strategies to do a literature review, and we thought that scoping review would be the most appropriate one because the research question is quite broad. We really want to learn everything that we can about collaborative response to child sexual abuse. And we started with trying to look only on low socioeconomic status countries, but then we understood with the help of Abby and Pragati that we need to widen our search and to look on all the countries around the world and then to learn from everywhere that we can. So basically, we look through those databases, and those are the terms that we use. I can circulate to you the terms by email, so you will be able to go through everything. And this is the prisma that we work with. I won't go into too deep, but we ended up after all the mapping with 66 manuscripts in English that were published in peer-reviewed journals, and we didn't have any exclusion criteria of years, okay? Because so we included everything that was published on collaborative response, no matter which year it was published. So now I will go into few of the descriptive characteristics of the studies that we identified. So one very interesting to see is like the development of how the literature address collaborative response in child sexual abuse. And we can see that in 2000, there were gradually more and more studies that look into it, but still I have to say that like every month, thousands of manuscripts are published on child sexual abuse. And still we only have those numbers on collaborative response, which is striking to my perception. The design of the studies. So almost 40% of the studies that we identified were quantitative in their nature. Almost 40 were qualitative. Almost 10 were both quantitative and qualitative. And 50% were non-empirical articles, mainly literature review, and we also addressed commentaries because we found them to be really reasonable, like when, you know, leading scholar or leading policymaker wrote some commentary in peer-reviewed journals, we did include it in order to learn what they're talking about and what they're referring to. In terms of countries, so most of the studies were conducted in the United States, then in Australia, Sweden, and then you can see the rest of the countries. There were 3 comparative studies that you can see in the blue circles. One in Europe with 28 countries, one that was carried in the US with additional countries, and one between Israel and the United States. This is just an attempt to make it on a map. And then we asked ourselves, okay, so when those studies were carried, who was the source of information for the researchers? Okay, so 28% of the studies were conducted on case file data analysis. 40% addressed workers' experiences, professional experiences. 20% addressed non-offending caregiver experiences, and only 12% addressed children experiences or children displays and behavior, which is also corresponds with what we know, that many of the studies are not conducted with children, but about children, and from professionals, from file data, and from non-offending parents. You okay until here?
Yes.
So another interesting thing to see is that we really want to see how much from the manuscript that we identified addressed Child Advocacy Center, because Child Advocacy Center is the most widespread model of collaborative response. So indeed, 45% addressed Child Advocacy Centers, but even though the 55% didn't address the name Child Advocacy Center, they did address other names of this kind of model. And we elaborating on the results, all the various names that we found around the world for this kind of model. Because we didn't find a lot of studies in the search, so in the search term, we put not only child sexual abuse, but also child abuse and child maltreatment, okay? Because we really wanted to look through everything. So 65% of the identified studies referred to sexual abuse, and 35% referred to other forms of child abuse. And now I will go into more in depth. And what we did was we characterized all the 66 manuscripts, okay? So we characterized the country, the method, what kind of measurements, what were the outcomes. And then we got a bit more deep, and we tried to talk about, I don't know if this is the suggestive framework for our team, but maybe it can guide us in some way, because it's offers some structure for how we can present collaborative work. So the first one will be why collaborative work? What we can learn from the studies that were identified, why we want to do collaborative work. So studies were talking about overlapping roles and responsibilities between different disciplines and different organizations, and the need to make everything more efficient. Studies were discussing about lack of coordinated services and the way it can harm both the child, but also the service. And they also were talking about consequences of non-collaborative work, mainly for the children, their families, and for the legal outcomes of the case. And all those studies have a consensus that collaborative work is the best way to improve the response to child sexual abuse. But when we try to understand a bit more, okay, so what is collaborative response? So we were trying to look whether we can find a definition, an agreed definition. Maybe we can identify who are the professional partners that are addressed in the studies, and what are the characteristics of the work? What is the identification, the characteristic of collaborative work? So we will start with the definition, and basically, there is a widespread agreement about the importance of collaborative response, but there is no definition what it is collaborative response. From all the 66 manuscripts that were identified, we found only one manuscript that included a definition of what collaborative response is, and it's appeared in this slide. All the other studies, their starting point was it's important, but never gave us, an explanation or a presentation of the boundaries of what is collaborative response. But we did identify, when we were trying to look on the various practices, different levels of collaboration. And basically, we can see 3 levels of approaches to collaborative response as can be identified from the manuscript. One is like sharing information and reference, like the most basic form of collaborative response. Then some of the studies refer to coordinated services, And then the higher level of collaborative response, as was identified in the manuscript, was joint work, joint decision-making, joint case review, and even joint placement and joint location for the collaborative response team. Okay, so when we were trying to figure out from the 66 manuscript, who are the professionals that are repeatedly referred to in the studies? So those circles represent how often and where is the consensus for professionals. So in most of the manuscript, the professional who repeatedly were referred to as essential and imperative to collaborative response were CPS, police, and forensic interviewers. Then additional manuscript included additional figures like advocacy, advocates, prosecutors, medical, healthcare system, and mental health. And very, very few studies, mainly commentaries from policymakers and from advocates of children, referred to the essential role of community and community leaders in collaborative response to children. Okay, so basically when we're talking about what are the characteristics that can be identified about collaborative response, so what we saw that there are standards that repeated, like child-friendly facilities, multidisciplinary investigation team, case review by the multidisciplinary team. But there were a lot of variations. The variations were with respect to the organizational base, the stage and the development, what is the referral process, and what is this model-specific emphasis. So many models, there's specific emphasis. One was on the legal outcomes of the collaborative response. So this is something that's important to mention. Okay, so when we're talking about the appearance and location, so there is an agreement, mainly among the manuscript that discuss the model of child advocacy center or something similar to it, that it's really important to have independent centers. Because police station may frighten children and child protective services may have stigma for children and their parents. And there was an agreement in the literature that we identified that collaborative response should have accessibility for children and their families and the professional. And the definition of accessibility is not only the when and where, but also without stigma, which is something really, really important and that is adaptable to children and to their emotional needs in something that is stress-free. So there was also a lot of agreement in those models of child advocacy center about the appearance, private interview rooms, home-like furniture, playing areas, and all the things that each one of us is familiar with child advocacy center already familiar with. So we will go on to what we know about the impact of those kinds of models. So those are a few examples of the various models of child advocacy centers. So when we're talking, okay, so now we will try to talk about what are the goals of those models, or the best practices for collaborative response that we identified. So first of all, our question was, okay, who identified the goals? And it's really important to say that there was no information about this question. So who say that this goal is the most important? But we found a variety of goals. Okay, so those are the goals that the studies address as important and beneficial to collaborative response. So to reduce traumatic experience for children and their families, to improve protection, to improve treatment, to improve legal services, to increase number of criminal convictions, to improve case management, to provide a range of services to victims. But also we found a lot of conflicts of the goal, mainly these conflicts. So we see that many studies are discussing the importance of legal outcomes for collaborative response to children, but at the same time, they're discussing the need to do trauma-informed services and how it can be conflicted for the professional, for the team, and how we can have a legal system that is adapted to trauma-informed best practices. So this is something I think that will be worth exploring as a team and maybe provide some initial direction in our framework. Okay, so now we will go into the measures. So what is being examined, like what is a good collaborative response, what is the outcome that was assessed, and in whose eyes. So those are the various studies and measurements that were conducted. So basically some studies refer to emotional aspects, like to see if there is reduce in emotional stress of children. They were exploring satisfaction with child advocacy centers, referral to mental health services. Some assess the collaborative response impact in number of receiving health exam, in referrals to forensic medical examination. Some measure the impact of collaborative response with protection, like reports to Regional Department of Social Services. A lot of studies refer to the legal outcome of the collaborative response, like number of cases went to trial, number of convictions, length of sentences, substantiated reports. And some of the measurements and the assessment went into the collaboration and did interviews with team, multidisciplinary joint meeting, trying to assess challenges and strength, share case tracking system, and joint training. So in whose eyes, as I said before, now it will be more illustrated. So most of the data is generated from professional experiences and perceptions, then from data, from files, then from non-offending caregivers' experiences, and the least studies were dedicated to the experiences and perceptions of children. Okay, so we also try to identify whether those studies addressed challenges and barriers in collaborative response, and what were they. So, among the challenges that we identified, that were referred to in the manuscript, we saw contradicting missions and agendas, as I elaborated before about the legal versus the trauma-informed. Some studies addressed cultural clash between professionals and the people who come into this collaborative response, and the need to adapt the collaborative response to various contexts in children's life. Some were discussing a lack of resources, limited resources, and the fact that collaborative response need to have an ongoing training for interdisciplinary team, and maintaining a high standards of decision-making, and addressing every problems each day in a row, and which is something that they struggle. Also, they were talking about one enormous challenge in collaborative response. This is the lack of clear instruction and responsibility. So many times when there is interdisciplinary team, even if they're sitting together in the same structure, the professional reported that they have different demands and different expectations and different employees, right? So like one psychiatric who is employed by the healthcare system, and the CPS who is employed by the welfare system. So they're sitting together, they're part of the same team, but each one of them is really obligated to different standards, different ethical sets, which was a source of a lot of confusion. They also share problems in information sharing. That was because of strict investigative security and privacy protocols around the world. And a lot of things that they were shared as well, that beyond the organizational gaps within the teams, within the collaborative teams, they were discussing a lot about ethical gaps. So someone is oriented toward more trauma-informed services or oriented toward children's rights, and now is conflicted with someone that prioritizing parents' rights, or someone that is more familiar with this group of culture, but someone else in his team prioritizing another group. So a lot of discussion about ethical gaps among the team and the need to find ways to overcome this. One best practice that was repeated through everything was joint training, joint supervision, and joint meeting through on a weekly basis. So this is the last slide, and we are now trying to organize all the best practices that were repeated through the manuscript, something that they're talking about, that it's something that works. So a clear protocol to a multidisciplinary approach, like who is responsible for what are the aims, what are the goals of the collaborative response, who defined it, how it can be measured, and a lot of focus in the best practices is dedicated into the way we can train teams in collaborative response in the best way to reduce the gaps that were identified before. So this is really fast and short from those initial findings, but I would love any questions, any idea. I will write everything and we will go into the data in order to further explore directions.
That's really good, Carmi. That seems like such a deep dive. Thank you so much for all of that work.
Yes, it was really excellent, Carmine. I had a quick question. I love how you broke it out, starting with the definition, because I think we assume we're all talking about the same thing. And this is a really interesting point I never thought about. But do these models identify who is usually the primary person or coordinator, or is that when they identify all of the particular players in this system? I'm curious if that is was ever brought up, and
yeah, that is a really good question. We were trying to look at this as well, but we couldn't find any identification in this manuscript, like who is the leader, who is responsible, who is the manager for all of this.
Yeah, and it might vary depending on who is the strongest party in your country's system, so that might be something we have to keep as a flexible option.
Did any of them refer to like a joint protocol or framework, and that's how they work through in any of the studies?
If they have like a protocol for the joint work, yes. So some of them referred to a joint protocol, and they have like mainly their protocol was with respect to how they will get the reference from whom.
Yes.
Who is responsible on the stages.
Yes.
But then they were discussing that there were many lacunes in their protocol, mainly in the decision-making points, and maybe it has to do with some of what Pragati you just mentioned about, there are many, who is the one with the power, who is the one that's making the decision, so yes.
Just one other question. Did some of the studies refer to the child's, you talked about different agencies and their priorities, etc. Did any of them refer to the focus of basically the Convention of the Rights of the Child? And this should be our reference group, so we actually have a child-focused type of outcome. And just as an extension of that, the analogy I use to people is with aviation, it's safety. And that's all the decisions around safety. Anything as the decision, safety becomes the bottom line. Whereas when we're dealing with these abuse cases, it's about best interest of the child, paramountcy. Anything around that?
This is an amazing question, Chris. Yes, it was really interesting to look into the paradigm of those models and whether they're generated from a set of values and ethical. So really fused. Identify themselves are generated from the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So Most of them were referred to legal outcomes and being beneficial and things like this, and not a lot were referred to the Convention of the Right of the Child as a base for their inspiration.
Yeah, it was really well done, Carmit. Thank you for this approach. I'm also curious whether most of those studies were focused on in-country, or were any of them looking internationally, especially the comparative one?
Yes, so 3 studies were done in comparison.
Comparison across countries?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Does anyone else have any other comments?
That fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen, I just want to say, Carmen, excellent stuff. Did any talk about, I always see everyone refers to training, but did any study refer to actually expertise and maintaining? Because I believe there's 2 levels. There's the initial training, get people understanding, working, and the next one is expertise amongst these working groups. Anything around that?
No.
No.
No,
Yeah.
they were only on the initial and the ongoing supervision, but no one referred to expertise and in-depth, training like you're referring to. This is really important to elaborate. Thank you for this.
I also really like the comment that I think is really the sweet spot. We are going to focus on making sure we make it trauma informed as well as legally informed, because I know this is a major clash or concern, I think, between some of the CAC model that people have, feel, versus making sure that we are health centered. So marrying those 2, I think, would make our framework especially unique for the users.
There's actually probably a lot of movement right now within CACs to make sure that all of the responses by all of the partners are trauma informed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it's
coming.
It's
Yeah.
coming. So just so that you're aware. I mean, but it's good. I agree. Trauma informed is key. Totally key.
Mm-hmm. It gives us a great starting point, Carmit. And thanks for joining, Ketty. And is it Muna here or Basma?
Hi.
Hi, Muna.
Hi, Muna. Hi, Ketty.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, so nice to see you. So we just went through the literature review. I don't know if both of you caught a little bit of this Carmit presented, but we're also recording this so you can see the slides to see what she has researched, what the evidence has shown us so far, which will be the starting point for the framework as we build it and review the surveys. So if you can take a look, and if any of you have any other questions or maybe comments about the search terms, anything that we feel may have been missing or that we didn't address or see in the studies.
I joined just maybe 5 minutes ago, so maybe after seeing the videos, the recording, if there's anything, I will share it.
Okay.
I will send all the group the PowerPoint presentation and the list of all the identified manuscript and their characteristic. So you will, and there is a link there to everything, so you will be able to look through.
It will be great, Carmit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just got a note that Barrett is coming as well. So I think it would be great for us to share that, Carmit, and then give everybody a chance to maybe permeate. Are there any particular articles as well that you think are worth us looking at that you would link to, especially the comparative studies?
Yes,
Are any of
I
those?
will single the one that I think are very rich and inspiring, that's maybe recommended reading for the group.
Thank you. That would be really helpful. Give us lots of ideas, get those thoughts churning.
Mm-hmm.
One other comment.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry,
No,
but I feel too often we buy into other people's practices when dealing with this type of issue, because it's just been the precedent. And we talk about trauma focused or legal focused. Well, my view is we should be advocating for child focused because it's totally neutral. In other words, we're not saying this is more, this is important. The child's your focus, that's your decision making. Just like a medical team looks at a child and think, what's the best procedure about, what's the best outcome for this child, and how do we achieve it? So it sort of neutralizes the importance of the professional so much. I'm not trying to mean it, but it really gets people focused on what is the important issue, e.g. the child. But I just say that, and that's where the convention comes in as our reference point and focus, and we build from that. Sorry, just.
And that's
I
a really
love
good
this.
thought.
And I think our final outcome as a group should definitely highlight our inspiration and our goal and our aim into the Convention of the Rights of the Child. That this is our task, yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Really good. All right.
I love that term and thinking too, for us to change it and maybe lift up, maybe that even using that different language, Chris, would make people not take sides, because this has become a little bit of a divided issue, and maybe it would make it more unifying for us to keep that as our central focus, is child outcomes being our primary concern. Hi, Barrett.
Hi, I'm very sorry.
No problem. We were just telling Carmit just presented a beautiful overview of the literature review. It's being recorded. So if you could just take a look at either her slides or the recording afterwards, but she shared the search terms and then what their team discovered, and it was really beautifully presented. So I think it will give us all an idea of where to start in developing the framework and some important points we'd want to address. So thank you, Carmit.
Yeah, thank you, Carmit. That was
And
fantastic.
happy birthday, Renetta. I'm just seeing it in my chat. You have a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Yes. Therefore, I cannot stay the whole time because the guests are coming. So I postponed the guests a little bit, but I cannot postpone it too long.
Oh, well,
Yes,
you're
so
very
what-
sweet.
Yeah, we
Happy birthday.
appreciate you joining us. So why don't we move on and start talking about the survey results
Yes,
and
please.
Airtable. And Renata, whenever you get off. And you and I, if you'd like, we can touch base a little bit later, or with
Okay.
Liz, or with
Yeah.
Prati or Jane about using
Okay.
Airtable in the review.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that you
Okay.
got now a little more of information. Did you get them from Uzbekistan now? No, that didn't work because you closed it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So-
we did get a really good response to our survey. So what I want to talk about next is we came up with a rubric and a process for how we are going to go through the 300 plus survey responses that we got, so that we can pull the important information that we need, with the purpose being that we are just looking for overarching themes, both in the strengths, the challenges, and the ideas that people had, so that this will inform our focus groups. So we are not coding this data. We are simply using it as a way for us to get high-level information. So the simplest way we found to do this in a structured rubric that would be the simple for everyone to follow. And this is actually a very easy tool. So I'm demonstrating it for you so that we can use it. It's called Airtable. And you will be getting written instructions tomorrow from Liz that will have a step-by-step with screenshots. But I just want to walk us through quickly an example of what this is looking like and what we're asking each of you to take about 20 to 30 minutes. It's not going to take you very long to do your assigned 10 or 15 survey responses. But we really want everyone to participate in this so that you have a good idea of the kind of responses we got, so that when we participate in the focus groups or we go to start to build this framework, we have each of us has a little bit of data and understanding of what some of the current issues are that people are citing. So the first column here, you look for your name. So as this is obviously Gabby's batch, you'll see how this is organized. So they're done in order. So the simplest way is you'll know which ones are assigned to you by looking for your name. So that's step one. So I'm going to go down to my name and just show you as we go across the board how this works. So the first column is your name, and the second one has a checkbox that you will do once you've completed all of these columns. And this is like a Google document, so you can work on it, leave, come back, and your answers will be saved. You don't have any worry, but only check this box once you've gone through and looked at all of these columns. So the main things we are asking you to do is for this survey, which was submitted, you will have a little bit of background information about who submitted this response. So this came from an NGO located, and they identified their region or country as Asia. But if they didn't identify the region, we would like you to come into the box. I already filled this one in, but it would be basically empty, see, as you got yours. And you will pick the region, which you will also be getting a spreadsheet that shows you what countries belong to which regions according to our ISPCAN classifications. So you would go into this dropdown and choose Asia here as your option for the region. You will also see as you continue to scroll to the right, and you can just move your arrow or mouse, that this person identified that they work with both an urban and rural population. So this is again just a little background information. And then you will see what their response was. And you can see this question was, if you hover here, let me just make sure that goes away. If you hover here, you will see the full thing. So this column was to list what were the strengths in responding to child sexual abuse allegations within their region or country. So this is the qualitative response that this person submitted, that there have been a few good initiatives started in a few countries like the Philippines. And so what we are asking you to do in this column of picking out the theme and the strength is to go to this box, and you will see some possibilities for drop downs. So we are going to ask you to add what are the key themes that this person identified were the strengths in their country or region. So you can scroll down here. We pre-populated a few more common responses, but if you don't see one that you feel fits, what is this person talking about is the major strengths, and you can pick more than one by continuing to use this plus arrow. You can see what they are listed here. And if you want to make it bigger, you use this box to make it bigger, and you can see what are the the potential options. But if you don't see the one that you think fits, you can always type in something, but we really want it to be a short word, a couple of words, or a phrase to summarize but don't repeat what they said, just pull out the theme. And you're going to type or pick what that is. So if it's NGO programs, it's reporting, they're talking about maybe there's, a multidisciplinary team. Those are the strengths. That's what you are going to put in this column for strengths. I'm going to pause here and just see, are there any questions on this, or is it straightforward? Just speak up if you have a question.
Can I ask a question? If there was if it was very generic statement and there was no theme, which is very clear, we just leave it without adding anything, yes?
Yes, or you can put here, Muna, like when you see here, no action. So say the government doesn't have, something like that, if you write it, so it doesn't leave it blank, but you say none listed or no actions.
Because this one, for example, you have picked up a very good one, good initiatives. There is nothing that you could classify it unless
it's not very clear.
Yeah, unless we add, for example, new initiatives.
Right.
Yeah, but otherwise, I think it's difficult to categorize or classify it under any of the other of the terminologies there. Okay, all right.
Right. So you'll have to use your judgment and see if what you think this means, and just do your best to classify it. And then we go to the next question. If there are any other questions, please just join in the conversation, because I can't see you with my screen on this. Then we're looking at the column to the right. So you just keep scrolling to the right. And, you know, this one was my number 44. So I know I can just keep following along. This one was asking, if you hover here, the question, please briefly list the challenges in responding to child sexual abuse allegations within the region you work and or provide services. So here, you know, as you see, the column will capture so much of it, but if you want to see the full response, you just expand the cell and you can read, there's no standard measures in place for Asian countries, different legal frameworks and policies, and in many have struggles with implementation, manpower, and competency issues over decades, in particular in Malaysia. In addition, there's a blatant differentiation of service provision for children who are non-citizens, refugees, migrants, undocumented, etc. So there's, you know, in the challenges, most likely you're going to get many. So this one, you will have to take a few minutes and pull out what you see are the key things, like the legal framework and policies, no standard measures, manpower and competency issues, difficulty with implementation. So here, when we come to this box, same thing, you will have an option where with this plus arrow, you will be able to come down and see what are the issues. So lack of resources, she said, the response, lack of systemic, you know, so anything that you feel is missing here, you would want to make sure that you type in and add an option. But first look and see if we have something that would fit, and if not, add it as an option here for challenges. Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward, and all of these we would handle the same way. In this last question, which is the last one we'll ask you to do, is if applicable, please briefly list ideas or solutions that you have to address the challenges in responding to child sexual abuse allegations in the region you work or provide services. So here, again, we would read what is their response and see the centralized reporting body with equipped training personnel attending to helplines, as they are the first responders, should be aided with risk assessment template to enable them to ascertain which support services to refer the victims to. Practitioners across the sectors need to be clear and provided with standard operating procedures on attending sensitively to cases and next steps to ensure perpetrators will be convicted. So this again has many ideas and thoughts that they want us to note. So we would go to this column where we're capturing the theme, and again, add all of those key themes with this drop-down menu. And you can use your down arrow to scroll through and make sure that we have the bucket or theme we see as the key. If not, type it in here where, you know, we want to make sure that it's, you know, it's an option that we see, and where it says add the option helpline, we would say yes. And that was how it adds as one option that everyone will then see as a possible theme. And then the last thing you're going to do is come back to the very beginning, double check that you filled in all of the fields, the region. So you have 4 fields you're going to fill in: the region, the strengths, challenges, and solutions. And then the last thing you will do here is you're complete and you're happy with it, is you will check this box. So this will allow us to make sure and see that everything has been done and we don't have any that are not complete. So everyone will be getting their batch. So again, you look for your name and then scroll across to the right. Pick, you know, first thing is the region. And then the themes for strengths, the themes for challenges, and the themes that they suggest as ideas for improvement. And that is it. So we are going to be asking everyone to do their batch. And the rest of these fields, again, are just for you to see, but not change any data. We're asking for everyone to be able to finish their batch of, 15 or so. That should take you about a half an hour by the end of the month. So by March 31st, we're asking everyone to complete this. So let me come back to all of you and see if there are any questions or comments, or does this feel doable, reasonable?
Renata, I know that you're going to have to leave us in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to just single you out and see do you have any questions before you have to get off? Any thoughts?
No, I don't. I have to go through all that because I am not accustomed to work this way. So I have to find out how to type in, if I have to make a document out of it or not. So I have to do not to work with the information. I have to work with the basics of the computer. That's my problem. So I will try to find some assistance in order to find how to do it, not what, how. Thank you. I understood Pragati. Was easy to understand and to follow.
Anybody have any other questions or feel worried about any part of this? Does this feel like it will be good for what our needs are to capture the main themes and understand what people are saying? They also proposed, and we didn't add all of the data here, just the things that we thought were really relevant. We have also captured the names and emails of people who want to help us with the focus groups, and examples of resources and best practices that they also shared. So those are also in the survey results. We just didn't want to complicate it by putting everything here.
Okay. Just one question. Yeah,
Sure.
so it's really good that you've tried to simplify it. Is there a little box or that in there to put like our own sort of comment or observation? And just to the side, if that's going to skew it, don't do it. But what I'm saying is sometimes you pick something up that's quite interesting that's not in the field that you just want to put a comment. This is what they also were saying. And, that it's quite relevant in that too. Otherwise, that quite important stuff could get lost. Something important could get lost. And you know how part of doing these surveys and reading it is something comes out of left field and you think, gee, that's actually very good, or that's very concerning.
I would say try to capture it as a theme, Chris.
Right.
Yeah, even if it's that you're creating, remember, a unique little description or category. And if that doesn't work, so start with that and try that first so that we can try to keep it as concise as possible. And if not, then maybe make a note for response number 83, I felt that this person, blah, 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 so that when we go into the next part of the working groups, if it feels relevant, we can address it at that point. But I'd rather not muddy up this sheet if you don't have to.
I'm going to go back for a second to Renata. Renata, would it be helpful if you contact Liz offline when you're done, when you have a chance, and maybe what you can work out with Liz is cutting and pasting. So in other words, you can do your responses, but she can type them into you.
Thank you. Another issue is, did I get it right? For instance, I get let's see, my landscape is Central Asia. So do you send me then all the information that you have of Central Asia for me to read through it and then to give comments, or is that, did I understand it wrongly?
We will just take it from the response that the survey respondent gave us, Renata. So
and they are all in already.
Yes. So what you will see, you will have reference to what region or country they self-identify as. You will see that this person is a mental health worker in this region. And we basically are going to take their words and understand what they are telling us in terms of what they see as the problems, the strengths, the challenges, and just summarize those.
But Renata, we are asking Pragati if you can move back to take the country that the person put in, and then add the region afterwards. So under that column, so it might be easier. Romania, if you go down a few lines to 87, which reason is Romania in? And then we'd ask you to be adding that.
I see.
Okay.
Okay. I will do my best. If I am at a loss, I'm contacting Liz. Is that okay?
Liz. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other concerns or questions about this process? Does this feel adequate for what our purpose is, so that we're not overdoing it, but capturing what we need in order to inform our focus groups and our framework?
So Pragati, I just wanted to add that the surveys were assigned very randomly. So it wasn't done by region. It wasn't done. We simply took the surveys and took the groups of 15. So it was not done at all by your designated regions that you live in, or any disciplines or anything.
Right.
And then just a reminder, this is only qualitative information. We still have all the great, rich quantitative data. So these are just the qualitative answers that we're trying to put themes next to.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Jane. So to not introduce any bias, we made it random. We thought it would give everyone an idea globally of what the perspectives are, and maybe some of the differences that we're feeling and noting. So as we go into the focus groups and we help lead them, we'll have a starting point of understanding. So like I said, this will take about half an hour. Honestly, if you sit down and do them all in a row, we did them, we tested this system, and it felt very straightforward and easy. So, we're giving almost 3 weeks to do this, but I would strongly suggest you do it sooner than later, so it just doesn't slip and it doesn't take that long. So
I would just put out there that in some of our discussions, personally, I have not been familiar with Airtable before or worked with it before. And when I first got the copy of the table, I have to tell you, I looked at it and I think I did one of those cartoons. My eyes kind of bugged out of my head and I got very overwhelmed with what I was looking at. But then once I got in and actually started testing it, it goes much faster than you might think that it does. So I'll just put that out there for the group as well, from my own experience.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the end of my demo. If there's no other questions, maybe if you have anything, come back to us by email, or if you need special help, as Renata said, just reach out. But your access should be straightforward. And Liz is going to be sharing the instructions again tomorrow with your login link, information how you get to this table, and then you can let us know if you have any issues.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all. That was good. All right. Well, then let's move on while we have a few minutes. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always nice too. So the next thing that we want to start thinking about is now that we're starting to really gather all this data, we have the survey results, we're starting to analyze them, we're moving full steam ahead on that. The next step after the survey are the working groups. And we think that we want to break down into 2 different work groups. One which is going to work on the framework and what we think that should look like, and the other working on the focus groups. So the framework is just to review the final themes, start forming, and it's very high level. We're going to all come back together as a group to do the nitty gritty, but the high level, starting to work on what that's going to look like, and categorizing and compiling the best and most promising practices into a Google Doc. The other group, because we're trying not to overwhelm everybody with too much work, is to come up with now focus groups. Where do we think we want to have them? Key questions, because those questions might be different depending on which area and what the results are showing, especially this qualitative results that we're working with now and all bringing together. And then looking and identifying lead regional volunteers who will help with doing the actual gathering of the focus groups, getting people to sign up, and conducting the focus groups, which hopefully we wanted to start doing in the early summer months, May, June, and into July. So do we want to identify those groups now, or just have people start thinking about where we're going to break out in the next meeting, Pragati?
Why don't we go through the data, and then everyone can start thinking about that, which one. We will just break out in the Zoom meeting into 2 groups so that we can have a discussion with small groups from this bigger, large, Zoom meeting. Because some people are missing today too. So if you just start to think about it, and after you look at Carmeet's literature review, you might be, more interested in one versus the other. But for the focus groups, we will be breaking out and making focus groups per each region. And we would like the people who choose that group to also potentially work on helping to lead those with the respondents who offered to also be part of them in each region. So that will be, you know, each of them will have a little bit continuation of work depending on which one you choose, and we'll try to make it an even breakout of people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Questions and thoughts?
Anything we're missing that you feel is important that we have not addressed? Okay.
All right. Any other
Thank you.
thoughts about anything that we've covered today? I know it was a lot of information and we did it faster than I thought that we would, even though it's been a solid hour. So thank you, Carmeet, and thank you, Pragati, for making that really understandable and digestible for everybody.
It's not usual. Usually we make things more complicated. And so no, it's a great teamwork. So thank you all. I mean, it's exciting to feel that we're at a place where we're starting to move forward with some real ideas for how this is going to land and end with something that we hope is going to be very useful and resource for people. And looking at some frameworks, some good examples is also something we can keep an eye out for now. Like the Inspire framework is an obvious, really great one to start with. But we can think about what do we think this might look like in the end, and how would we make it so that it's really user friendly for people to access and follow and, you know, use in the end, not just sit on the shelf.
Right, and be able to be adapted because
Yeah.
they look differently in different areas, different countries, different regions. So,
Exactly. Okay.
all right.
Thank you all. So we'll just stay in touch. And if there's any other ideas you have, anything else you want to take forward, let us know.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you all. This is really great.
Excuse me,
Yes,
is
ma'am.
it possible just to have a short conversation with you, Pragati and Abby, after the
Sure.
meeting?
Of course.
Yeah.
Just 2 to 3 minutes.
Of course. No problem.
Yeah, I'd love to. And anytime if there's anything like that that you want to circle back with Abby or I one-on-one, something that you think is important that we make sure we are doing as part of this project that may not be, you know, part of this meeting, just reach out and we can have a conversation one-on-one.
Or about anything having to do with the project, anything at all.
Life.
Like,
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye,
everyone.
thank
Bye,
you.
Bye, everyone.
It was nice to see you again.
Yes,
see
you
you.
too.
Bye, Kathy.
Thank you all for your help with the surveys.
yes.
Okay.
Enjoy your day, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Pragati, I'm just going to pause the